you very much. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for that introduction, Simon. Yeah, I'm Kate Merry, and as Simon said, I'm Head of Volunteering and Engagement at Butterfly Conservation. I'm going to start with a quick pre-apology, which is that this is my second day now in full-on all-day Zoom meetings, so I'm a tiny bit zoomed out, and then decided to counter that by drinking copious amounts of coffee, which I'm now debating whether or not that was a good idea. But hopefully I will deliver a coherent talk that you all shall enjoy. So let's see how we get on. So big city butterflies. Yeah, what an exciting time this is for butterfly conservation. It feels quite unusual for me actually to be delivering a talk on a project that's hasn't started yet. Normally you would talk about a project as you're going through, so you've got things to talk about and images to show, or you're delivering a talk at the end of a project to show what it's achieved. But with big city butterflies, this has been kind of on our desks as something that we've really wanted to do at Butterfly Conservation for such a long time, for a couple of years, actually a good few years. And it's been a long journey to get to this point. So actually it's totally appropriate to be giving this talk and celebrating the start of what we hope to be a fantastic project for London and a fantastic project for butterfly conservation. So I shall just start by this wonderful image. Here we are. Here is London, or at least I'm not there now, but London is my hometown, born and bred. Here is the setting for this really exciting, groundbreaking project for butterfly conservation. It's home to let's go back, Kate, that didn't work. It's home to 9 million people, jam-packed into 607 square miles of urban metropolis. And at first glance, it might seem a kind of a surprising landscape for an organisation dedicated to the conservation of butterflies and moths to want to venture into. But here is London from a different point of view. This fantastic map showing London's green space reveals over 37 SSSIs, that's sites of special scientific interest, 147 local nature reserves, over 1,500 sinks or sites of importance for nature conservation, more than 3,000 parks and open spaces. 47% of London is green. A truly remarkable fact when you think about it, and it makes London really quite a unique city in that respect. So let's have a little zoom in and go to one of those little green blobs on the map there, because nestled in the city of London is the very fabulous Barbican Wildlife Garden. It's a small but surprisingly tranquil spot where goldfinches are going to be bickering over the seed in the bird feeders that the volunteers put out, and there'll be cut paths in that lovely wildflower meadow that invite you to explore. And if you were to follow one of those cut paths, you might spot a common blue butterfly enjoying a nectar stop on a daisy. Now, these are the so often overlooked moments that are out there. They're across London and they're waiting to be discovered and enjoyed. London is green and does support a really surprising diversity of butterflies and moths. And that is why us, Butterfly Conservation, can't wait to get to London. There are so many exciting and really significant opportunities for us, and Big City Butterflies is this brilliant project just at the right time, really, for us to grab those opportunities. So what are the aims of the project? Okay, so we want to help Londoners discover and connect with butterflies, moths, and the green spaces that support them. There is loads of evidence now of the increasing disconnect between people and nature and the host of issues that this creates in terms of physical and mental health. It's nature deficit disorder. This phenomenon is more pronounced in towns and cities, sadly, where access to natural spaces is, of course, more limited. But butterflies and moths are a fantastic hook for connecting people to nature. We have seen firsthand how their beauty, their fragility, their diversity, they just inspire this delight and wonder in people, in children, but in adults too. We want to improve the quality and the connectivity of green spaces to increase their suitability for butterflies, moths, and other wildlife too. The green spaces within London hold enormous potential to better support butterflies and moths, and our development phase work the work that we've been doing over this past year, or before this past year actually, has shown a clear need for the kind of specialist and targeted advice that we can offer. We want to increase levels of recording and monitoring across London. So butterflies and moths are relatively under-recorded in London, especially in the central boroughs. We need a better understanding of their abundance and diversity so that we can evaluate the effectiveness of our current and future efforts to conserve them. We want to increase opportunities for butterfly conservation to engage with new people, new audiences. This project is going to enable us to engage with different age groups, primary school age children, families, through to people of working age and retired people. And the cultural and ethnic diversity of London presents us with a really fantastic opportunity to engage a broader audience than we have done before. And finally, we want to enable butterfly conservation to develop and test new approaches to conservation in an urban context. So the project is going to be delivered under kind of 3 main themes or strands. Firstly, we've got our engagement programme. So this project is absolutely going to have people at the heart. And the project will be able to respond to the kind of unique nature of the project sites and those diverse communities that really enjoy them and are connected to them. Then we've got our recording and monitoring strand of the project. So these activities are going to tap into the huge potential, those huge audiences, those millions of people, to increase uptake of our really established recording and monitoring schemes we have in London. And finally, we've got the habitat management strand. And through advice and training opportunities, we really want to improve the capacity of London's green spaces to support thriving populations of butterflies and moths. So as I think I mentioned, we have actually undertaken a great deal of development work for this project. This happened, it would have been 2019, so obviously we've been hugely delayed to go into the delivery phase of the project by the pandemic. But previous to the pandemic, we had completed a year of kind of trialing and testing our ideas for this project. And that's part and parcel of a big application like this to the National Lottery Heritage Fund. They really want to scrutinise your bid, your ideas, before they release those public funds effectively. And it really challenged us to kind of think about how we're going to approach this project. And we were really lucky to work with a fantastic project development officer, May Webber, and this is kind of her work that I'm talking to you about now. So through that development phase, we actually made quite a few changes and adaptations to how we originally thought that we might deliver the project. So for example, we needed some adjustments to our school engagement programme. So we're pretty experienced now in creating this curriculum focused but really exciting and hands-on workshops for primary age children, and we have delivered these in cities. But May's experience when she went into those London schools demonstrated that school grounds are, can be really quite limited in central London. So our workshops involve giving the kids hands-on experience, planting nectar and food plants for butterflies and moths in their school grounds. So we would typically walk the school grounds together, talking about good spots for wildlife and how it could be improved. But in some cases, it just wasn't possible to use the school grounds in this way in central London. They were just too small, too limited. So May trialled upping sticks and taking the children on a walk off-site to their local green space. Our schools have been selected partially on their locality to the sites that we want to work at in London. So we know that there are good sites within walking distance. And there we can show the children what their local park is and how it offers a home to butterflies and moths and caterpillars. And we hope we'll be able to encourage the kids to look at their local park in a new way, through a new lens, as a place to enjoy and discover wildlife, as well as a place to play in and gather in and walk through. So another thing that we really kind of learned from and developed in that kind of trial year, at Butterfly Conservation, we fully recognise that as an organisation, our staff, our supporters, our volunteers do not reflect UK society in terms of ethnic diversity. So the diverse communities of London, therefore, offer us an opportunity to explore widening in our audiences in a way that hasn't been possible in more traditional projects that see us working in these kind of rural, really quite sparsely populated areas. But we know it's not going to be about simply kind of dropping into this kind of diverse setting and assume that we're going to get diverse participation, because we know that the barriers to engagement with organisations like ourselves for BAME people, for example, are numerous and complex. Sorry, that's Black, Asian and people from minority ethnic communities. So working on our own, we actually lack the experience to do this opportunity justice. And that's why we went out and support the fantastic support of an organisation called Wild in the City in the form of training for our project development team and our key volunteers. Wild in the City is a specialist organisation with a focus on promoting wider engagement in the natural environment among those underrepresented communities. I have to say, it was one of the best training experiences I've ever benefited from. And so we have and are going to continue to apply the learning from this training experience across the breadth of the Big City Butterflies programme. So 2020 has seen equality, diversity and inclusion issues very much in the spotlight in our sector. And it's been a year of listening and learning for us, and we're going to be writing an equality, diversity and inclusion policy in the new year. And there's no doubt that Big City Butterflies is going to be a really good opportunity for us to learn. We're also really pleased to be working in partnership with Wild in the City in terms of our engagement activities that we'll be offering. So I might touch on that again later. So a couple of other things that we sort of tinkered with in that development phase. We had plans for fixed interpretation at sites that we might be working on in London. And at the time, we envisioned that these might be murals or play equipment in parks, or perhaps some kind of interactive interpretation panels, that kind of thing. But during the development phase, and specifically our work with communities, with community groups, we felt that it would actually be more powerful to more directly involve our communities in the creation of that kind of interpretation work. So we're going to be looking at collaborating with local artists, perhaps, to commission a series of community-led creative workshops. My apologies, I shall quickly mute. That's good, that's been answered, hopefully by my other half. Yeah, apologies, there might be a child or a dog bursting in at some point. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but I forgot to unplug the phone. So yeah, looking to collaborate with local artists to commission those, kind of really creative opportunities, those creative workshops. And again, I'll do a little bit more on that later. So on now to the habitat management work of the project, because of course this project, as Simon alluded to at the start, is a really big departure for butterfly conservation in terms of how we deliver our kind of habitat management and habitat management work. So I thought I'd start by showing you an example of a setting for a more typical butterfly conservation project. This is Exmoor, and was part of a recent really big landscape scale project for us called All the More Butterflies, which focused on some of the UK's most threatened species, including the marsh fritillary butterfly. So working on landscapes such as these, we're typically working with relatively few landowners given the scale of the landscape. So it's therefore a relatively straightforward process to define your project area and select which landowners and communities you need to engage. But of course, London's green spaces do not look like that. London is an entirely different ballgame, of course. Here, the green spaces are dispersed across the urban landscape. They are small pockets of land with multiple and often competing uses. There are numerous landowners and managers and communities to engage with. And it was therefore the first step for the project development team to decide an approach on selecting project sites to ensure maximum conservation outcomes. So the first thing here to say is that the Big City Butterflies project is going to be focusing on London's inner boroughs. We had to kind of thrash out and come to an agreement between ourselves and the branches as how we were going to focus our efforts for this project. Because of course, London is vast, London is huge. But really, we felt that it was the inner London boroughs that had the most to gain from a project like this in terms of kind of that community engagement element. I think I keep pressing my slide button by accident. So yeah, we have identified flagship sites across our project area. And that was a result of this development work that May was carrying out in 2019, you know, on the ground, going out, meeting different landowners and site managers, and kind of trying to pinpoint where we might kind of focus our activities. So we kind of had a bit of a criteria as to how we selected those areas. Oh, yeah, I am accidentally moving my slides on when I don't mean to. But to summarise, our criteria for the selection of flagship sites considered the diversity of butterflies and moths present at the site, the capacity of that site to demonstrate different examples of management practices, both good management and where improvements might be made, the presence of really good access and appropriate facilities, and the potential to work with local communities and volunteer groups. And at this point, I just need to say a massive thanks really to all of the various site managers and site owners and the different community groups and local authority staff that we've engaged with, because it's been such a welcoming environment to walk into. And also people have had to be really patient. This is a project that's taken a long time to develop, with all these unexpected delays as well. Oh, that's sorry. So the green spaces in London are varied. We've got the kind of really large expanses of heaths and commons, to the royal parks, to much kind of smaller and humbler spots. The great majority of flagship sites that we've selected to work with are local authority owned and managed sites, often managed in conjunction with a dedicated Friends of group. They are the kinds of sites that are heavily used by local communities for leisure time, to meet friends, to play football, to walk through on the daily commute. But most importantly, these are the sites that have the best potential for people to discover and enjoy their local wildlife. You know, it's the nature on their doorsteps, the nature under their noses, that we want to really encourage people to discover and connect to. So we've got these flagship sites, and then we've got kind of a wider network of what we're calling satellite sites, which we've also identified. And these sites consist of green spaces kind of surrounding those flagship sites, such as schools, allotments, smaller parks, and other community managed green spaces. These allotments here, for example. So satellite sites are going to be really crucial in ensuring that we have the greatest gains from habitat enhancement, restoration and creation, as these areas offer fantastic opportunities for establishing networks of really good wildlife habitats. And in a landscape such as London, it's crucial to make space for wildlife wherever possible, to enable species to kind of move and disperse and establish new populations. So just to give you one example of how a flagship and a satellite site might interact, here is Brockwell Park. It clearly has excellent examples of good management for wildlife and currently supports good assemblages of butterfly and moth species. But there still might be a desire here from staff managing the site to improve it still further and benefit from the kind of tailored specialist advice that we can offer. For example, focusing in on specific species needs and their particular food plant requirements. And we could deliver this by offering those site visits and providing training workshops, not just for the managers of the sites, but for those of neighbouring ones too. And here might be some allotments nearby. The site has fantastic potential to better support butterflies and moths and create opportunities for species to move across their urban landscape. And so we'll be engaging with community groups such as allotment holders, offering advice in a really kind of accessible and practical way that will support them to enhance the wildlife value of their site. And here is the local school grounds, with again, great potential to improve these school grounds to support butterflies, moths and other pollinators. And our school programme offers these kind of practical sessions where possible, using a selection of butterfly and moth food plants and nectar plants to bring colour and wildlife right into those school grounds. So I hope that's helped to illustrate how the Big City Butterflies will achieve its aims to improve and connect habitats for butterflies and moths, predominantly through advice and site visits, training and through the provision of resources. And here's just a group of Islington Borough staff enjoying a habitat management training workshop in our development phase from my colleague there. Shout out to Dr. Phil Sterling, who has been a great supporter and has had fantastic input to the project. But that said, we still are very much intend to be getting our hands dirty with practical work throughout the duration of the project. But you'll see us delivering this work as part of our engagement activities with our project audiences, with our volunteers, with our schools, with our friends of groups. So that's all about the kind of site selection and the habitat work. But of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, engagement with people, with communities is going to be a massive part of this project. And so part of that work in the development phase was kind of to identify who can we reach? Who's going to be interested in this project? And we kind of started to think about all of the different stakeholders, to use project speak, but stakeholders in different groups of people that we're going to want to be reaching through this project, and what kinds of activities and communication will each of those groups need. So we kind of got our kind of audiences there that are already really quite specialist, our borough ecologists, our friends of groups attached to parks, right down to people with actually no prior interest or knowledge of butterflies or moths, and those kind of school children, people from community groups that don't have a specific focus on nature. So this is, again, a really fantastic opportunity to just spread our passion and our love for butterflies and moths among a really broad audience. So just to tell you a little bit about the kind of targets of the project, actually, what are we going to achieve? How many of what are we going to deliver and when? As I've mentioned, we've developed a really successful school outreach programme. A programme that was in fact kickstarted by lottery funding back in 2012, which was called Munching Caterpillars, and was all about bringing the kind of joy of butterflies and moths to a really young audience and using them to kind of hook them in, engage them with nature. So we're really looking forward to bringing that programme to inner London, where children will be among the most deprived in the UK in terms of their access to green space. And I in particular look forward to what I think will be a hugely rewarding element of the project. So we really hope that our school programme is going to enable kids to take their new knowledge and confidence and seek out nature in their gardens or other local green spaces. And we hope that not only will they have learned new things about their natural heritage, but they will have changed their attitudes and behaviours towards it too. So we want to start to kind of plant the seed in a new generation about the importance of caring for our natural world. Can't even see my own slides there. So 72 workshops, will be delivered over the duration of the project. Okay, so loads of numerous communities and volunteer groups surrounding our project sites across the 17 boroughs, and each of those communities is of course completely unique, ranging in size and age range of the members, but they could be brought together by shared motivations or interests or circumstances. So we're really going to be tailoring the community events that we deliver to the nature of those communities, depending on what their needs and their interests are. So they could be as varied as having a moth trap morning, having a breakfast around the opening of a moth trap, for example, so that communities can see what's literally on their doorstep. So we could actually be working with housing associations or kind of blocks of flats or the communities literally adjacent to those green spaces to help them discover basically what's right there on their doorsteps. So I mentioned before about our work with Wild in the City, and that during the development phase, contact was made with them to help us to think about how our project could help to kind of overcome some of those barriers to kind of connecting and reaching out to those audiences. So we're really looking forward to partnering with Wild in the City for the delivery of the Big City Butterflies project. So together, we will select project sites for the delivery of Wild in the City's Nature Connectors courses. So this is a really unique offering that Beth and Wild in the City has developed, and that we're so pleased to be working in partnership with them. So these courses help Londoners to nurture a closer relationship with the natural world through learning woodland and living skills, wildlife identification, and traditional crafts. And these sessions support adult volunteers from Black, Asian and minority backgrounds to feel comfortable and confident engaging others in nature. So our partnership will see us contributing our specialist knowledge to Wild in the City's courses and supporting and funding the programme, whilst leaving the delivery actually to Wild in the City. So engaging with the wider public is going to be a really important part of Big City Butterflies. The project's going to be reaching out to as many people as possible over the 4-year course through numerous public events, hopefully face-to-face events. I'll come on to that later. So we know that butterflies in particular hold a really special place in the public's affections. So far as invertebrates go, they are easily the most recognisable. And I mentioned right at the beginning that they are such a fantastic hook for capturing people's interest in wildlife. You don't need special equipment to find or observe them. You just need a little spark of interest. And during the development phase, numerous public events were attended, providing an opportunity for us to speak to members of the public and test ideas for suitable activities to run and messages to promote. So we particularly loved surprising people with the beauty and diversity of moths. There was always great interest in the live specimens that we brought along to show people, and our request for people to take home butterfly and moth-friendly plug plants for their own gardens always had fantastic uptake. And we were amazed by how many people would show us photos of butterflies, moths and caterpillars on their phones and wanted help in identifying them, which of course we were more than happy to help with. So our public events are going to be really important opportunities for us to support people, to learn about the butterflies and moths in London and to be surprised by them and how they can help take small but positive steps to help them thrive. So recording and monitoring, as I said, is the third strand of the project. And the activities that we will deliver through the project will enable butterfly conservation to boost participation in our various different recording and monitoring schemes. These established and really widely respected schemes generate data that is used to identify trends, direct our conservation effort and assess how effective that effort is. And anyone can take part because we have different schemes for different levels of knowledge and effort required. We have a bit of a data black spot over inner London, so this project is really going to help us identify how butterflies and moths are faring. So we're going to be delivering a total of 38 identification and recording workshops and tailoring them to the different interests and abilities, if you like, of our different community groups and different audiences. So as a result of all our kind of recording and monitoring training and community engagement work, we hope that across our network of flagship and satellite sites, we'll be able to establish regular recording and monitoring activity at those sites. And this is important because in order for us to get the best from our schemes, we need data to be gathered year on year, allowing us to establish trends rather than having a kind of snapshot in time. And this is really where the legacy element of the project builds in. We want to be able to hand over ownership of the project to the communities that we work with. And we very much hope that this, their kind of efforts, their enthusiasm will long outlast the actual delivery phase of the project. So I kind of mentioned the habitat management part of the project, so I won't dwell on this too much, but just to say that we'll be delivering site advice visits across inner London. I just couldn't resist using this photo just because it shows the kind of diversity and the kind of different green spaces that we might be asked to provide input here. I mean, you've got, as I said, you've got to take every opportunity in London to make green spaces work for wildlife, whether that is a large park or a raised bed on a station platform. And I've already mentioned those habitat management workshops there, which is going to be an opportunity for us to demonstrate ideal best practice habitat management techniques for various species and the most effective and efficient ways that we can create habitat for butterflies and moths and other insects too. So finally now, to close my little sales pitch. So we would love more people to get involved in the project, and there are going to be loads of different ways that you could help, and we will be very much welcoming new volunteers with open arms. So you might perhaps be skilled in propagating plants that could be used to enhance a local school ground. You might have a gift for enthusing others and sharing your passion for butterflies and moths with others. You might be interested in helping us to survey your local green space, or you might have a suggestion. for how you can help. You know, we're open. We want to hear about all the different ideas, things that we've never considered before, all sorts of ways that actually people can contribute to this project. So we'd love to hear from you if you would like to join the Big City Butterflies team. I couldn't go through this talk without mentioning the impact that COVID has had. As I say, I think I mentioned at the start, this project has been delayed significantly by COVID-19. And in fact, just as we were going back in time to March of last year, we had submitted our bid and we were waiting to hear the decision from the lottery, which is a nerve-wracking time for us. For anyone that's been involved in a big funding application, you'll know how that feels. But quite soon after we went into lockdown, we were contacted by the lottery, who asked us if we wanted to postpone the decision. Did we want to delay it? And at the time, if you can remember back then, we didn't know what was going to happen, did we? It was kind of, is this all going to blow over in a few weeks? But actually our kind of senior leaders at Butterfly Conservation took them up on the offer and said, yes, we do want to delay the decision on this project. And I remember feeling absolutely gutted at the time and thinking, this is awful. We can't delay the project. We're ready to go. We've got everybody on board. And then I just had a bit of a word with myself and said, well, if they can postpone the Olympics, then Kate, you can postpone Big City Butterflies. And thank goodness we did, because it just wouldn't have been the project that we wanted to deliver. Of course it couldn't. And over this past year, though, we have soldiered on at Butterfly Conservation. We found new ways to connect with our audiences. We've switched training from face-to-face opportunities to going online. As a team of staff, we've learned so many new skills. So actually going forward into Big City Butterflies now, we're going to be taking some of that stuff on board and actually applying it to the project, hopefully not because of socially distancing restrictions, but because actually sometimes it can be a really effective way to deliver things like training events, for example. So, you know, we're perhaps in a stronger position than we were a year ago, although you wouldn't have convinced me of that at the time. And of course, what else have we learned from lockdown? Something else significant happened. All of a sudden, there was this kind of national conversation around the solace people were finding in noticing nature around them. Life really slowed down, didn't it? And time spent in natural spaces, natural environments became so precious to us. And there's a survey that Natural England do, the People and Nature Survey. It's one of the kind of main sources of data on how people experience and think about the environment. And the results from the period April to June 2020 showed that 85% of adults reported that being in nature makes them happy. And this was consistent across different population groups. And those who'd visited a natural space in the last 7 days reported being happier than those that hadn't. I mean, it's not surprising, is it? But it, you know, now borne out in evidence from this big survey. So Big City Butterflies is a project that's all about encouraging a greater connection between communities and their local green spaces. So in a post-COVID world, the need for this project hasn't diminished at all. In fact, it's grown stronger. Butterflies are even frequently used as a metaphor for recovery. And I think we all need a bit of recovery to look forward to in 2021. So that brings me to the end